When President Donald Trump signed an executive order imposing a 25% tariff on Mexican imports, particularly on cars and light trucks, the decision sent shockwaves to the global economy. On March 29, 2025, the executive order ignited a chain of events that raised critical questions, not just for the United States, but for Mexico, Canada, and the rest of the world. These tariffs, which have now officially gone into effect, could alter the very framework of North American trade and possibly lead to the collapse of long-established relationships. So why does this matter so much? Stay tuned as we dive into this shocking development. But before we proceed, don't forget to subscribe to the African Web channel for more insightful content on global affairs and political transformations. North American trade has long been governed by agreements like NAFTA, now United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, creating an interconnected network of supply chains that span borders. Mexico has become a crucial part of this system, especially in the automotive sector. The US has long relied on Mexican imports of cars, trucks, and auto parts. But this executive order turns the tables. Will it lead to a massive shift in the way goods move across borders? Or will it be a temporary blip in an otherwise smooth-running system? The answer, of course, is more complicated than a simple yes or no. As the world watches, the question looms large. Will this tariff escalate into a full-blown trade war, or will diplomacy prevail? The tariffs. An overview of Trump's decision. The decision to implement a 25% tariff on all cars and light truck imports from Mexico was made with specific political and economic motives. The tariffs were part of a larger agenda by the Trump administration to address what it has described as unfair trade practices and unfavorable trade imbalances between the United States and Mexico. But is this move truly about correcting trade imbalances? Or is it a more politically charged decision aimed at sending a message to both Mexico and other countries that the US will no longer tolerate what it sees as an unbalanced system? Mexico, for its part, has become a key player in the global automotive supply chain. The nation is home to factories that produce cars and light trucks for the US market, making it the second largest supplier of vehicles to the US. In fact, nearly 70% of Mexican automotive exports are shipped north, a number that shows just how deeply the economies of the two nations are intertwined. Given this, the decision to impose such a heavy tariff is bound to have severe consequences. The Trump administration has argued that its move is designed to correct trade imbalances and protect US manufacturing jobs, particularly in the auto industry. However, the timing of this decision raises more questions than it answers. For Trump, the justification lies in the long-standing complaint that Mexico's lower labor costs give its manufacturers an unfair advantage. The administration has long sought to reduce the US trade deficit, particularly with countries like China and Mexico. However, the move to apply these tariffs comes with substantial risks that might undermine the very industries the US hopes to protect. Does Trump truly believe that higher tariffs will benefit US consumers and businesses? Or is this just part of a broader political narrative aimed at strengthening his position domestically and reinforcing his image as a staunch protector of American workers? What is the real motive behind such a drastic action? Economic policy, political positioning, or something else entirely? The imposition of tariffs on Mexican goods cannot be viewed in isolation. It is part of a broader global trend of rising protectionism, with countries around the world beginning to question the viability of free trade agreements and global supply chains. In many ways, Trump's decision echoes his broader America First economic policy, a policy that prioritizes US interests over global cooperation. But can the US really afford to isolate itself from its trading partners, especially those as economically intertwined as Mexico? The decision to impose these tariffs on Mexican goods has put Mexico in a difficult position. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has chosen to respond with a calm and measured diplomatic strategy. She has made it clear that Mexico does not believe in an eye for an eye approach. Instead, she has advocated for dialogue and negotiation, even though the tariffs threaten to harm the country's vital automotive industry. But can Mexico afford to play the long game with diplomacy, or will it eventually be forced to retaliate? How much longer can the Mexican government hold out before taking more drastic measures to protect its own economic interests? These are not easy questions to answer. Sheinbaum's approach is one of caution, but the stakes are incredibly high. Mexico's automotive exports to the US are worth billions of dollars annually, and the tariffs are expected to cause massive job losses in the industry. And if Mexico does decide to retaliate, what will the consequences be for the broader US-Mexico relationship? Will the two nations find themselves in an all-out trade war, or is there still room for diplomatic solutions? The economic impact of these tariffs will be felt not just in Mexico, but in the United States as well. In 2024, Mexico exported more than $182 billion worth of cars and parts to the US, with nearly 1 million jobs tied to this industry. The imposition of a 25% tariff on these goods will undoubtedly raise prices for US consumers, especially those looking to purchase new vehicles. Higher prices on vehicles will also affect US manufacturers, many of whom rely on affordable Mexican imports for parts and components. As the cost of doing business rises, it could drive up the cost of American-made vehicles as well. Will American consumers be willing to pay the higher prices, or will they pull back on their spending? Furthermore, these tariffs could create job losses in industries beyond just the automotive sector. Supply chain disruptions could ripple across other sectors, impacting industries such as steel, aluminum, and agriculture, all of which have significant trade ties to Mexico. Canada, as a member of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, has found itself drawn into the trade conflict between the US and Mexico. Though the tariffs primarily target Mexican imports, Canada shares deep trade ties with both the US and Mexico, especially in industries like steel, aluminum, and agriculture. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has already made his stance clear, calling for a united front with Mexico to oppose the US protectionist measures. However, Canada is not immune to the fallout from these tariffs, as it relies heavily on its trade with the US and Mexico for the export of various goods. What role will Canada play in these negotiations? Will it join forces with Mexico to push back against the US, or will it attempt to distance itself from the conflict to protect its own economic interests? The stakes are incredibly high for North American trade. These tariffs could change the course of the US-Mexico-Canada economic relationship, and the outcomes could have global consequences. What will the future of North American trade look like in the years to come? Will the region continue to be a model of cooperation and integration, or is this the beginning of a long period of fragmentation and trade wars? Will Mexico's diplomatic approach prevail, or will the US continue to push its protectionist agenda? What does this mean for Canada, and how will the global economy respond? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the African Web for more in-depth analysis on major global shifts that could redefine our world.